The first thing I saw after paying for my new room was a beautiful woman in a bathrobe. The second was the women-only sign behind her. She screamed, "I checked my key, room 417, then she checked my face and screamed again, this time with legal intent. A petite woman with long black hair and a lab coat stepped out across the hall, walked straight toward me, and grabbed my wrist. Pulse 96. I stared at her hand. "I just got screamed at," she nodded. "Useful baseline." A third woman with short, dark violet hair and glasses pushed my box aside to reach the Ethernet panel. "Move. Hello to you too," she pointed at the wall. "Your room has the fastest port." Before I could ask why she knew that, the bathrobe woman leaned against her door and smiled through a white facial mask. "Are you the entertainment?" "I'm Evan Park." Her smile widened. That wasn't my question. I had been inside Bellwether for 43 seconds. One woman wanted my pulse, another wanted my internet. The third wanted to know if I was single, and the discount had already become expensive. The fourth woman was tall and elegant, with long chestnut hair, sharp green eyes, and clothes that made her look ready for court on a Saturday. She took one look at me, the bathrobe, and the pulse check. "Nobody say anything else?" The bathrobe woman raised a hand. "Can I finish my question?" The newcomer pointed at her. "Especially you, Sabrina." Then she faced me. "Camille Ward, 4th floor representative. Why are you here?" I held up my key. "I signed up for a dorm swap." She stared at me. "This is a women's graduate residence." I'm starting to suspect that. Camille took my phone and read the assignment listing: Bellwether, room 417, Evan Park, and a 30-day minimum. "The assignment is incorrect." The woman holding my wrist checked the screen. "The biometric information appears correct." When I asked her name, she introduced herself as Nina Sayo from Biomedical Research, which explained the lab coat but not the boundaries. The woman at the Ethernet panel was Zoe from Robotics, while Sabrina studied psychology and relationship behavior. I looked at all four. Law, medicine, robotics, and psychology, all in one building? Sabrina smiled. "And you?" "Data systems." Zoe looked interested, Camille looked concerned, and nobody disagreed when I said that combination should not be allowed. I called campus housing on speaker because Camille wanted witnesses, and the woman who answered sounded like she had already survived 3 system failures that morning. She confirmed the assignment, explaining that Bellwether's 4th floor had recently been reclassified as individual graduate housing because of low occupancy. The old signs had not been removed, the residents had not been warned, and the portal had shown me the building regulations before I confirmed. Camille turned toward me. "You read them?" I confirmed that I read them. Her eyes narrowed. "That is not what I asked. Housing had already assigned my old room to another student, so canceling now would cost me the deposit, the transfer credit, and the $200 monthly discount that had caused this disaster. Another room might open later, but until then, 417 was legally mine." Camille thanked the woman and ended the call. Then Sabrina looked at me. "How badly do you need $200? "Enough to ignore 4 women discussing me like a gas leak." Nina checked her monitor. "Pulse decreasing. He is adapting." "I am dissociating." Zoe lifted my box and said I could stay, then pointed toward my room when Camille stared at her. "Fastest port." Camille folded her arms. "That is not the deciding factor." "It is my deciding factor." Sabrina copied her pose inside the bathrobe. "I vote that we keep him." "Nobody is voting," Camille said before turning to me. "There will be a meeting at 7. I picked up my box. "Do I have a vote?" "No," I nodded. "Great, democracy is already thriving." I spent the afternoon unpacking while the hallway stayed suspiciously quiet, although every few minutes, somebody passed my door and slowed down. Nina left a bottle of water outside, Zoe asked for my router password before asking whether I owned a router, and Sabrina knocked once before opening the door without waiting. "For research purposes, how do you feel about older women?" I looked at her. "How old are you?" 25. "I'm 24. She smiled. "So older." Camille appeared behind her and pulled her out by the sleeve. "Do not conduct research on the new resident." Sabrina pointed down the hall. "You let Nina do it." "Nina has forms." Nina appeared from nowhere holding a clipboard. "I do." Camille closed my door, so I locked it. 10 seconds later, Zoe sent a message to my phone saying my lock was connected to her system. I unlocked it again because there are moments when dignity becomes too expensive to maintain. The meeting began at 7 in the common room, where Camille had prepared a temporary residency agreement containing 19 rules. Nina brought a pulse sensor, Zoe brought a tablet connected to every light on the floor, Sabrina brought popcorn, and I sat closest to the exit. Camille began. Bathroom access will be scheduled, common areas require appropriate clothing, and nobody enters another resident's bedroom without permission. I looked at Sabrina while she ate popcorn. No experiments involving a resident without informed consent. I looked at Nina while she wrote something down. No unauthorized modifications to the building network. Zoe quietly turned her tablet face down. Camille continued. No romantic behavior in common areas. Sabrina raised her hand. Define romantic. No, Sabrina smiled. Then the rule is vulnerable. Camille ignored her and explained that the arrangement would continue until housing found me another room. I didn't request another room. 4 faces turned toward me, so I explained that I had spent the last month calculating whether instant noodles counted as a financial strategy. Room 417 was private, close to my campus job and $200 cheaper, so unless the ceiling collapsed or somebody harvested an organ, I planned to stay. Nina looked mildly disappointed that I had mentioned organs before she had. Camille closed the document. Then we will evaluate the arrangement on Sunday. I asked what happened Sunday, and she calmly explained that they would decide whether my presence remained tolerable. And if you decide it doesn't? We strongly encourage you to request a transfer. Sabrina passed me the popcorn. She means we make your life emotionally educational. Camille gave her a look, Sabrina smiled back, and the meeting ended with 19 rules, 0 answers, and 1 chocolate protein bar Nina claimed was a consent gift. I returned to my room at 9, connected my laptop, and discovered the internet was faster than the library. For 11 beautiful minutes, I believed the worst part was over, then the smart display above my desk turned on by itself. Zoe's system had mirrored the 4th floor group chat onto the wrong screen, revealing a conversation titled Operation Evict Evan. Under it sat 4 assignments, Camille on Monday, Nina on Tuesday, Zoe on Wednesday, and Sabrina on Thursday. Their objective was to make the male resident request a transfer before Sunday, and the winner received control of room 417 after I left. I read it twice before a new message appeared. Sabrina asked if they should feel bad, Camille answered that they should only feel bad if I found out, and Zoe confidently added that I would not. Then the display went black. I walked into the common room carrying the screen under one arm, and all 4 women froze. Camille stopped speaking, Nina stopped drinking tea, Zoe looked from the empty wall bracket to the display in my hand, and Sabrina slowly lowered a cookie. I placed the screen on the table. You have a 7-day eviction challenge. Nobody answered, so I continued. The law student gets rules. The biomedical researcher gets my body. The roboticist gets psychological warfare with electricity. And the psychology student gets whatever felony she was planning for Thursday. Sabrina raised a finger. Nothing technically illegal. Comforting. Camille stood and reminded me that it had been a private conversation. About privately ruining my week. Her fingers tightened around the pen. We were trying to protect our living environment. The 4th floor had been their space for 2 years, a place where they studied, slept, and walked to the bathroom at night without checking who was in the hall. A man appearing without warning changed all of that, and I understood their concern. I also understood that leaving would cost me $600 immediately, because empathy has limits, and mine was priced. Fine, I said, keep the challenge. Nina blinked, Zoe tilted her head, and Camille asked if she had heard me correctly. I pushed the display toward them. You have until Sunday to make me request a transfer. If I leave, you get the room, but if I stay, the challenge ends and nobody treats me like an intruder again. Sabrina's smile returned. What do you get if you win? Peace. She laughed. Choose something possible. I pointed toward the kitchen. 1 shelf in the refrigerator, permanent access to the washing machine, and nobody touches my rice cooker. Zoe immediately asked if she could examine it, scan it, or improve it, and every answer was no. Especially the last one. Camille looked at the others. Nina nodded first, Zoe followed, and Sabrina held out her hand. Deal. I shook it, although her fingers stayed around mine half a second longer than necessary. 1 more condition, she said. No complaining when the challenge becomes uncomfortable. I smiled. You should add the same condition for yourselves. Camille signed the agreement and announced that Monday began at 6. It was already 9:15 on Sunday night. You people couldn't let me survive 1 weekend? Camille capped her pen. You signed up for graduate housing. Survival was never included. At 5:55 Monday morning, Camille knocked on my door with a 47-page rulebook. I opened it wearing sweatpants and the expression of a man who had slept 4 hours. You had 19 rules yesterday. She handed me the book. Those were provisional. I asked what happened to the other 28, and Sabrina waved from her doorway in a pale blue bathrobe. I asked questions, which improves legislation. The new schedule gave me 12 minutes to shower, 15 minutes in the kitchen, and required 24-hour notice before using the laundry. Male clothing could not remain visible in common areas, while hallway eye contact was limited to 3 seconds if either resident was dressed for sleep. I looked up. How do we measure that? Zoe's voice came through the speaker above us. Camera tracking. I stared directly into the lens. I hate this building. Camille pointed toward the bathroom because my shower window had already begun. Then Sabrina approached carrying shampoo and still wearing the bathrobe. Mine too. Camille checked the schedule. That is impossible. Sabrina leaned closer to me. Shared resources build trust. I put on the sunglasses from my pocket, stopping her immediately. Why do you have sunglasses? Rule 23. Eye contact prevention. Camille looked at Sabrina. Sabrina looked at me. And I walked past both of them. The first battle ended before 6:01. I followed every rule, because that was my attack. Rule 11 required the kitchen to be cleaned immediately after use, so at 6:30 I turned on the vacuum and woke Nina, who entered with her hair loose and one eye closed. Why is the floor screaming? Camille values sanitation. Rule 16 reserved quiet hours from 10 at night until 7 in the morning, so at 10:01 I knocked on Camille's door because her printer was running. She opened it wearing a dark green sleep shirt, no makeup, and an expression that could have overturned a conviction. Neither of us spoke for 3 seconds. Then she remembered Rule 23 and looked at the wall. Your printer is creating an unsafe emotional environment. Camille told me to go to bed. I asked if that was an official instruction. It is a threat. I smiled. Threats aren't listed in the rulebook. She closed the door very slowly. Because Camille did not raise her voice, she raised consequences. By Tuesday morning, the 4th floor had filed 11 complaints against itself. Sabrina could not cross the hallway in a bathrobe without Zoe's cameras announcing a possible violation. Nina lost kitchen access after forgetting to label a yogurt. Zoe's drone was grounded, and Camille accidentally banned herself from the common room by scheduling 2 meetings at once. At breakfast, all 4 sat around the table staring at me while I ate cereal from my assigned bowl. This is delicious, I said, although it was not. Camille put down her coffee. You exploited ambiguities in a good faith framework. I reminded her that I had followed every word, so she argued that not every rule required literal enforcement. That sounds like something a losing law student would say. Sabrina choked on her drink while Zoe quietly added a point beside my name. Camille noticed. There is no scoreboard. Zoe kept typing. There is now. Nina studied me and declared that my stable pulse proved I enjoyed conflict. I enjoy affordable housing. Camille removed 38 pages from the rulebook and returned the revised version. When I asked if I had won Monday, she claimed it was not a competition. All 3 women looked at her until her jaw tightened. Fine, Monday was inconclusive. Zoe changed my score from 1 to 2. Nina began Tuesday at 6 with oatmeal, a blood pressure cuff, and one disturbing question. Do you consent to breakfast? I studied the gray substance in the bowl. That depends. Is breakfast being punished? She described it as low sodium, high fiber, and controlled calories, while fastening the cuff around my arm before I answered. Her plan was simple. She would turn my life into a clinical trial until I escaped. Every meal was weighed, every drink was measured, and a sensor on my wrist buzzed whenever I sat too long, slept too little, ate too quickly, or experienced what Nina called unnecessary cardiovascular excitement. Sabrina walked through the kitchen in running shorts and an oversized sweater, making the sensor buzz. Nina checked the screen while Sabrina looked pleased. Interesting. Environmental spike. I covered the device. Your sensor needs manners. Sabrina leaned over my shoulder. Or more data. It buzzed again, so Nina moved between us and claimed her subject required stable conditions. Sabrina smiled. You sound jealous. Nina tightened the cuff. Jealousy would contaminate the study. Sabrina's smile widened. That was not a denial. My fingers went numb, and Tuesday had started only 6 minutes earlier. At lunch, Nina replaced my noodles with steamed vegetables. At 3 she confiscated my energy drink, and at 6 she ordered 8,000 steps. While she adjusted my tracker, I checked hers and discovered she had walked 900 steps while surviving on 2 coffees, half a banana, and something recorded as emergency almonds. Control groups follow the same protocol. She took back the tablet. I am the researcher. Then you should survive your own research. Camille looked up from her laptop and admitted I had a point, although she immediately regretted saying it. I amended the agreement, forcing Nina to follow the same meal and sleep plan she imposed on me. Zoe approved the logic, while Sabrina approved anything that made Nina exercise in the hallway. By 7, all 5 of us were doing squats as Camille read case notes. Zoe complained that human knees were poorly engineered, and Sabrina counted every 5th repetition twice. Nina maintained perfect form for 18 minutes, then stood too quickly and swayed. I caught Nina before she hit the table, one arm circling her waist as her forehead landed against my chest. For the first time since we met, she had no clinical comment, and her face had gone pale. "When did you last eat a real meal?" she asked me to define real. "Anything that wasn't an almond." Nina tried to step back, but her knees disagreed. Sabrina stopped smiling, Camille closed her laptop, and Zoe brought a chair. I sat Nina down and cooked fried rice with eggs, frozen vegetables, and enough sodium to make her file a complaint. She watched every movement. "You did not weigh the oil." "I measured spiritually." Nina frowned. "That is not a unit. It is when you're poor." She ate one bowl and then another, claiming the second was for replication. At 11, I found her asleep at the common room table beside 3 research papers. I moved her laptop, placed a blanket around her shoulders, and sat down to finish my own work. 10 minutes later, her head slipped onto my shoulder. I froze as Nina's breathing slowed and the tension left her face, making her look younger when she was not trying to outperform biology. Zoe passed through the room, stopped and raised her phone. I whispered, "Don't," but she took a picture and called it a rare event. Sabrina appeared behind her wearing my black hoodie, although I had no idea when she stole it. She looked at Nina, then at me. "Is this included in the health protocol?" "Apparently I'm furniture." Sabrina sat on my other side and reserved the remaining shoulder. I rejected the reservation, but she leaned against me anyway. My wrist sensor buzzed so violently that Nina woke up, saw Sabrina against my other shoulder, and checked the reading. "Severe environmental interference." Sabrina closed her eyes. "You still sound jealous." Nina removed the sensor and claimed the equipment was malfunctioning because it lacked privacy, then folded the blanket and left. 2 minutes later, she sent 2 messages telling me to eat breakfast tomorrow and making it clear that this was not a request. Zoe adjusted the scoreboard, giving me 3 points and Nina 1. Nina looked out from her doorway. The study continues. Wednesday belonged to Zoe, which meant the building itself became hostile. At 4 in the morning, my alarm used Camille's voice to announce that I had made a procedural error. The lights flashed red, and my mattress tilted 6 degrees toward the floor. When I tried to escape, the smart lock asked me to prove I was not a robot by identifying traffic lights in 9 photographs. 3 were drawings and 1 was a toaster. Yet after I selected every traffic light, the lock calmly announced, "Access denied." I shouted Zoe's name, and her voice answered through the ceiling. "Incorrect answer. The toaster was not a traffic light. It identifies as infrastructure." I removed the batteries and opened the door manually, finding Zoe outside with her tablet, oversized black hoodie, and an offended expression. "Analog interference is cheating." I held up the screwdriver. "This is analog interference?" "Exactly." At breakfast, my chair moved whenever I approached, the coffee machine called me temporary mail unit, and the refrigerator refused to open because my shelf had exceeded its emotional capacity. I looked at Zoe. "You made the fridge passive-aggressive," she pointed at Camille. "It learned from her." Camille nearly objected, then decided the comparison was accurate. Zoe wanted to make the smart dorm so inconvenient that I begged for a normal room, while I wanted to survive without giving her useful reactions. I wore earplugs, used a flashlight, and opened the refrigerator through the emergency release. When the shower changed from hot to freezing, I finished anyway and entered the hallway with wet hair and a towel around my neck. Sabrina stepped out, saw me, and forgot what she was saying, while Nina's sensor buzzed from inside her room. Camille came around the corner holding a folder, and her eyes dropped to the wet shirt against my chest before returning to my face with professional violence. "Why are you dripping on the floor?" "Zoe believes temperature is a personality test." Zoe checked her tablet. "He lasted 4 minutes." Sabrina recovered quickly. "I would like to review the footage." Camille insisted there was no footage. Zoe said nothing, and all 4 women looked at her until she deleted something. By noon, I traced the smart system to a diagnostic panel in the common room. I studied data systems, so although I could not build Zoe's robots, I understood what happened when someone connected private devices to a public residence network at 3 in the morning. I opened the error log, and Zoe moved faster than expected, reaching across me for the tablet. When I pulled it away, she climbed onto the couch, leaned over my shoulder, and grabbed my wrist, bringing her face within inches of mine. Her turquoise eyes widened behind the glasses, and neither of us moved until the screen lit up with a warning that system mirroring was active. "What does that mean?" Zoe looked genuinely afraid. Every television and lobby display connected to the campus residence network changed at once. The first slide revealed Operation Evict Evan, the second displayed our scoreboard, and the third showed Camille handing me the rulebook, Nina sleeping on my shoulder, Sabrina wearing my hoodie, and Zoe currently pressed against my back while trying to steal the tablet. The campus residence forum exploded before Zoe could disconnect it, and messages appeared faster than we could read. People claimed 4 women were fighting over one man, Bellwether had a secret harem, and the robotics student had me pinned to the couch. Somebody asked which woman would win and created a poll. Sabrina entered, read it, and smiled like Christmas had arrived early. Nina immediately checked my pulse without a sensor, while Camille stood motionless in the doorway. "Turn it off," Zoe kept typing. "I am trying." The poll reached 2,000 votes, giving Sabrina 41%, Nina 24%, Camille 22%, and Zoe only 13%. Zoe stopped typing. 13? I told her to focus, but she complained that the sample was biased. "The sample thinks you kidnapped me with a refrigerator." She pushed her glasses higher. "That should improve my score." The lobby display changed again and asked who would get the dorm husband. I closed my eyes. Because I was no longer a roommate, I was a campus group project with a pulse. By dinner, strangers recognized me. A student at the library whispered, "Stay strong, King." Someone left 4 energy drinks outside my room with a note saying they were for survival. And a campus meme page posted a diagram linking me to all 4 women, like an investigation into organized crime. Camille demanded a complete shutdown of Zoe's system, Nina wanted the images removed for violating medical confidentiality, while Sabrina used the bathrobe photo as her profile picture and gained 600 followers. Zoe stared at her 13%. "I fixed the elevator last month. These people have no loyalty." I sat at the table. "Did Wednesday end?" Zoe locked her tablet. "No." I reminded her that the system had exposed our challenge, called me emotionally unauthorized, and still left her losing the poll. Her eye twitched. "Temporary errors." I leaned back. "Wednesday belongs to me." Zoe gave herself 1 point and gave me 4 because physical proximity had performed well. Camille confiscated the tablet and suspended the challenge until the network was secure, but Sabrina noticed she had reached 46%. She looked at me and smiled. "Thursday remains scheduled, wear something nice." Sabrina knocked on my door Thursday evening wearing a red dress and a dangerous smile, then handed me a black jacket. "Put this on." When I asked why, she explained that tonight would demonstrate why living near 4 attractive women was emotionally unsustainable. The first 3 days already submitted evidence. She dismissed them as amateurs. Behind her, Camille stood with crossed arms, Nina held my pulse monitor, and Zoe carried a camera she insisted was disconnected from the network. I looked at all 4. "Is everyone attending?" Sabrina slipped one arm through mine. "They claim they are supervising." Camille objected because public exposure was not part of the agreement. Nina insisted my cardiovascular response required observation, and Zoe needed better polling data. Sabrina rested her head against my shoulder, making the other 3 fall silent. "They are jealous," she whispered. Camille's eyes narrowed. "We can hear you." Sabrina smiled. That is why I whispered loudly. Sabrina called her plan romantic pressure exposure and reserved a table at the busiest cafe on campus, directly beneath the residence forum's favorite window. Within 5 minutes, half the room was pretending not to watch us. She sat beside me, called me darling, fed me cake, and touched my arm whenever somebody raised a phone. I knew the goal was to make me so uncomfortable that I admitted the 4th floor had become impossible. But Sabrina was better at starting games than finishing them. When I moved closer, her smile froze, and when I placed my arm behind her chair, she forgot the question she had prepared. "Your breathing changed." She called it controlled excitement, so I pointed out that her hand was cold. "Air conditioning." I looked around. "We're outside," Sabrina corrected herself. "Aggressive weather." I looked at the clear sky, she pinched my arm, and the crowd loved it. Camille arrived first and placed a folder on the table. "Sabrina, your method exceeds the agreement." Sabrina kept her hand on mine. "You interrupted my session." Camille pointed at the windows. "Your session is occurring beneath 6 cameras." Nina arrived with 2 drinks, placed the low-sugar one in front of me, and removed Sabrina's cake because I had exceeded my glucose recommendation. Sabrina reminded her that I was not tonight's subject. Zoe sat across from us and opened the campus poll. Sabrina reached 52%. Statistical intervention is necessary. I stared at all 3. "You followed us to a date that isn't a date because you're worried strangers think it is a date." Camille called the sentence structurally defective, while Sabrina claimed my sentence was fine, and Camille's denial was defective. Nina moved closer to me. Zoe adjusted the camera until Sabrina was no longer centered, and I realized 4 women were fighting over one fake date while refusing to admit they were jealous. Somehow I was still losing. Sabrina refused to surrender and pulled me away from the table because the final stage required privacy. Camille stood immediately. Absolutely not. Sabrina promised the observers would remain 30 feet away, although Camille correctly pointed out that this was not privacy. We stopped beneath a tree beside the cafe while phones watched from every window. Sabrina faced me, placed both hands on my jacket and looked up. Most men would request a transfer before this becomes complicated. Most men didn't already lose a deposit. She accused me of hiding fear behind financial responsibility, so I accused her of hiding fear behind flirting. Her smile flickered, the first real reaction I had seen from her, but she stepped closer anyway. What am I afraid of? Finishing the move. When she asked what move, I answered, this one. Her eyes dropped to my mouth and her fingers tightened on the jacket, while the confident psychology student suddenly looked like she had forgotten every book she had ever read. I leaned close enough to make the crowd disappear from her attention. If you're going to bluff, I said quietly, don't close your eyes. Sabrina's eyes opened, and her face turned bright red. She stepped backward, caught her heel, and dragged me with her until I caught her around the waist. The cafe erupted, Zoe's camera clicked, Nina's monitor beeped from 30 feet away, and Camille said something that sounded legally violent. Sabrina stared at me from inside my arms without a comeback. I helped her stand, then she brushed off the dress and faced the audience. The experiment is complete. I asked who had won. She looked at me, then at the three women approaching with very different expressions. The experiment was contaminated. Zoe checked the poll and discovered Sabrina had jumped to 68%. Severely contaminated. On the walk home, Sabrina stayed half a step behind the others, so I slowed down until we were side by side and asked if she was okay. Perfectly. I reminded her that she had nearly tackled me after a fake kiss. The ground moved. Aggressive weather again? She laughed, then admitted she had never done that before. I thought she meant threatening a man with romance, but she meant going on a date. Relationship psychology was easier when every emotion belonged to somebody else. She had taught communication workshops, advised couples, and even written about intimacy avoidance, yet actual intimacy made her brain leave the building. So you weaponized flirting without field testing. She claimed to have excellent theoretical preparation. You fell over. Your response was outside the model. At the dorm entrance, she stopped. Would you have kissed me? Before I could answer, Camille opened the door and announced that the challenge did not permit follow-up questions after the assigned day. Sabrina smiled at her. You listened through the intercom. Camille claimed the door was open, although it had not been. Friday was supposed to be the final coordinated attempt, but the challenge collapsed into civil war. Camille reserved breakfast with me to discuss residency terms, Nina arrived with food for two, Zoe disabled Camille's calendar because the software showed bias, and Sabrina walked in wearing my hoodie while announcing unfinished exposure work. Camille looked at the hoodie, Nina looked at the hoodie, and Zoe looked from Sabrina's 68% to me. I studied my breakfast. Does anybody remember that your goal is to make me leave? Silence followed. As Camille opened her folder, Nina unpacked the food, Zoe restarted the calendar, and Sabrina pulled my sleeves over her hands. They remembered the goal. They simply no longer agreed on what victory meant. The campus made everything worse. Flowers arrived for Sabrina, somebody sent Camille a fake marriage contract, and Zoe received a replacement camera with a note asking for better angles. Then 4 matching shirts arrived labeled property of the 4th floor, while mine called me a shared asset. I held it up. I am setting this building on fire. Camille confiscated the shirt because arson violated 6 remaining rules. Sabrina immediately wore hers over the hoodie, Nina claimed hers was useful sleepwear, and Zoe discovered the code on the sleeve linked to the poll. Camille called all of them undignified, although 10 minutes later I saw her shirt folded inside her room. By afternoon, the joke turned ugly when someone uploaded an edited video of Camille handing me rules, Nina attaching the censor, Zoe locking my door, and Sabrina treating our date like another experiment. The caption claimed 4 privileged graduate students were bullying a broke transfer student for entertainment. The comments changed immediately, with students demanding their removal and anonymous messages calling Camille controlling, Nina dangerous, Zoe invasive, and Sabrina manipulative. Sabrina closed her profile. Zoe disconnected every camera, Nina removed the sensor from my wrist, while Camille read the messages without changing expression, which was how I knew they hurt. When I picked up my phone, Camille told me not to respond because the attention would disappear. The story is about me. She looked at the messages. The consequences are not. I reminded her that she had tried to evict me with a refrigerator, but she correctly said that was not a defense. Instead of defending the challenge, I told the truth. Zoe connected one camera to the residence forum, and all 5 of us stood in the common room as the viewer count passed 3,000. My name is Evan Park. Yes, I entered the women's graduate dorm by mistake. And yes, These four tried to make me leave. Camille attacked me with paperwork. Nina removed flavor from food. Zoe made me prove I wasn't a toaster. And Sabrina nearly kissed me for science. Sabrina covered her face while the comments accelerated. What the edited clip leaves out is that I discovered the challenge on the first night and agreed to it. I have fought back ever since. Nobody here is my victim, and if anyone is losing, it is them. Camille looked at me. Nina appeared ready to object to the medical wording. Zoe whispered that the toaster test was valid, and Sabrina lowered her hands with a smile. I faced the camera again. You can laugh, I do, but stop threatening people you don't know because you watched 20 seconds without context. These four women are strange, competitive, invasive, and completely incapable of minding their own business. Camille's eyes narrowed. They also fed me, fixed my internet, gave me rules when I had no idea where I belonged, and made one bad week more entertaining than my previous year. The challenge ends between us, not because a crowd ordered it. I ended the stream, and nobody spoke until Sabrina pointed out that I had called them strange in front of 6,000 people. I also called you entertaining, she smiled. That is almost romantic. Nina touched my wrist without checking a monitor. Zoe adjusted my score to 5 and Camille closed her folder. You should not have done that. Probably. Her voice softened. Thank you. That evening, housing gave Camille one chance to request my immediate removal because of the public complaint. There would be no penalty. I would receive a full refund, and room 417 would return to the existing residents, meaning she could win with one signature. She read the form alone at the common room table while I watched from the hallway. Her cursor hovered over approve, then she selected withdraw complaint and closed the laptop. When she noticed me, neither of us spoke. The deadline expired. I pointed out that the email had arrived 3 minutes earlier, so she blamed an administrative error. You hate administrative errors. Camille walked past me. Not all of them. She had spent 4 days trying to make me leave, but when she finally received the power to do it, she threw it away. The official challenge ended Friday at 9, when Camille called a vote and 4 hands chose to cancel. I raised mine too, but she reminded me that I was not a member of the original agreement. I am the objective. That is not the same thing. Sabrina leaned across the table. Do you want to leave? I answered no, making Nina exhale while Zoe deleted the scoreboard, paused, then restored it from backup. Camille collected the remaining rules and announced that our arrangement would continue without competition. Sabrina raised her hand. What about romantic competition? Especially without romantic competition. Nina asked what qualified as romantic, and Camille looked toward the ceiling as if asking a higher authority why every woman on the floor had become Sabrina. Zoe reopened the calendar, so I stood and announced I was going to my room. All 4 women wished me good night at the same time. I stopped in the doorway. That was unsettling. Sabrina smiled. You'll adapt. Saturday was our first day without a war, and it was much worse. Camille asked before scheduling breakfast. Nina gave me coffee without checking my pulse. Zoe returned manual control of my lights. Sabrina wore her own clothes, and everybody behaved politely. By noon, the silence became unbearable. I preferred the refrigerator insults. Zoe looked relieved. Camille closed her book. Nina pushed a plate toward me, and Sabrina retrieved my hoodie from behind the couch. The 4th floor returned to normal in under 30 seconds. That evening, they planned what Camille called a peace dinner, with each woman contributing 1 dish. Nina measured everything to the gram but confused teaspoons with tablespoons, producing soup salty enough to preserve a body. Zoe used a robotic arm to fry dumplings until it detected smoke, panicked, and threw one onto the ceiling. Sabrina ordered expensive takeout, transferred it into a pan, and claimed emotional ownership, while Camille followed a recipe like a legal contract and refused to adjust the heat because the instructions did not authorize discretion. I tried helping all 4 at once, then Zoe's arm hit Nina's soup. Nina grabbed the pot, Sabrina backed into Camille, Camille dropped a tray, and the fire sensor activated the sprinklers. Cold water filled the kitchen, and everyone screamed except Zoe, who tried measuring the sprinkler pressure. I reached the emergency valve and shut it off, then turned around to find all 4 women soaked. Sabrina's auburn hair clung to her face, while Nina's white shirt had become a situation I avoided examining for legal, medical, technical, and psychological reasons. I removed my black overshirt and handed it to her without looking down. Camille noticed, took a towel, and pulled me into a chair. Stay still. She dried my hair with quick, irritated movements while I insisted I could do it myself. You will drip on the floor, I pointed around us. The floor is underwater. That is not permission. Her fingers slowed, and when I looked up she was standing between my knees, much closer than either of us had realized. Sabrina watched from inside my hoodie. Nina wore my overshirt. Zoe's camera opened by itself, and Camille stepped away so quickly she nearly fell over the soup. We ate the surviving takeout on the common room floor, where Camille finally explained why room 417 had been so cheap. 3 previous applicants had rejected it after seeing the floor. One survived a 10-minute tour, another heard Zoe testing a drill at midnight and left without collecting the application, while the third met Sabrina in a facial mask, allowed Nina to take her temperature, and withdrew before Camille finished presenting the rules. Housing kept lowering the price. I stared at them. So I wasn't the first victim. Sabrina shook her head. You were the first one too poor to escape. I had thought I found a bargain, but Zoe ate a dumpling and corrected me. The bargain found you. Nina added that I had survived longer than predicted, while Camille looked at the damaged kitchen. Survival remains disputed. My phone vibrated with an offer from West Graduate Hall, a private bedroom with a private bathroom, no building restrictions, and a price $50 lower than Bellwether. The deposit would transfer, and I could reserve the room until Monday morning before deciding when I collected the key. Every practical problem disappeared in one email. I passed the phone around, and Zoe discovered faster internet. Nina found the library was 4 minutes closer. Sabrina noticed nobody wore bathrobes in the hallway, while Camille read the terms twice. This is the rational choice. I waited for somebody to disagree, but nobody did. Nina folded my overshirt and returned it. Zoe stared at the dark television. Sabrina stopped smiling, and Camille handed back my phone. You wanted an affordable room, this is better. She was right, so I reserved it until noon Monday. The common room became quiet. It's only a reservation. Sabrina stood and called it reasonable. Nina collected the containers. Zoe carried her robot arm to the lab, and Camille opened the damaged rulebook without turning the page. I had won the eviction challenge, but nobody looked happy. I started packing Sunday morning and discovered my room now contained Nina's vitamins, Zoe's cables, Sabrina's hair clip, and a blue pen Camille claimed she had not been searching for. I placed everything outside, but within 20 minutes every item returned. Sabrina put her hair clip on my desk while maintaining eye contact, then Camille appeared and asked why her pen had been left in the corridor. Because it is your pen. She placed it on my desk. It has adapted to this room. Zoe leaned out of her doorway. The room has strong retention behavior. I looked at all 4 women. Are you helping me pack, or colonizing the next dorm? Nobody answered fast enough. They decided to help, which was a mistake. Camille organized everything. Nina removed food she considered unsafe. Zoe labeled cables by voltage and emotional relevance, while Sabrina sat inside the largest box wearing my hoodie. When I pointed out that she had contributed nothing, she claimed to be testing capacity and refused to move because the box felt attached to her. Nina found chips that had expired 2 days earlier. Time remains linear. Camille discovered the original residency agreement with the eviction contract attached, read the signatures, tore the challenge in half, and packed the remaining rules. I asked if she wanted a souvenir, evidence that intelligent women can make poor decisions in groups. Sabrina raised her hand from inside the box. Motion accepted. By afternoon, my room looked ready to leave while the hallway did not. Nina packed meal containers. Zoe installed a signal extender West Hall supposedly needed. Camille printed instructions for collecting the key, and Sabrina stole the black jacket from our fake date. When I demanded it back, she claimed it belonged to a shared memory and invited me to retrieve it from her room. Camille appeared behind me and said, "Do not," while Nina approached with the pulse sensor and Zoe opened her camera. I abandoned the jacket because some battles cost more than replacement clothing. We ate our final dinner around the common room table, although nobody called it final. Camille named it a residency transition meal, Nina called it nutritional preparation. Zoe preferred network migration meeting, and Sabrina called it a breakup dinner until 3 people threatened her. They ordered my favorite food without asking because they already knew, and that affected me more than the silence. I had moved often enough to become good at leaving, but being asked to stay was the part one had no practice with. Sabrina finally broke. Do you actually want the West Hall room? Camille reminded her that they had agreed not to pressure me, but Sabrina insisted she had only asked a question. Your questions come with traps, Sabrina smiled. Only the good ones. I described the private bathroom, faster internet, and lower rent. Zoe flinched at the internet, Nina looked down, and Camille called them rational factors. Sabrina did not look away. That wasn't my question. She was right. I wanted the new room, but I also wanted Tuesday breakfast arguments, Zoe's hostile refrigerator, Camille's rules, Nina's midnight messages, and Sabrina stealing everything I owned. I don't want to stay because you feel guilty, and I don't want you to lose the space you had before I appeared. Camille tightened her grip on the glass. That space no longer exists. I blamed the campus for calling me their shared boyfriend, but Zoe corrected me. The current term is dorm husband. That is worse, Sabrina smiled. Not universally. Camille set down her glass. When you arrived, we wanted the old floor back and assumed removing you would restore it. Nina called that assumption unsupported. Zoe said the environment had changed before the first data cycle. And Sabrina translated. We got used to you. When Camille looked at her, Sabrina corrected herself. Some of us became emotionally dependent and are hiding behind technical vocabulary. Nina looked offended, Zoe did not, and Camille promised they would not make my decision for me. It was mature, respectful, and completely unbearable. I nodded. Then I collect the key tomorrow. Nobody stopped me, and dinner ended quietly. At midnight, boxes moved in the hallway. I opened my door and found Zoe beside two suitcases she called equipment cases, even though they contained clothes she described as soft equipment. Nina emerged carrying a bag and froze. Camille stepped from the common room with her laptop, while Sabrina's door remained suspiciously closed. I asked what was happening, but Camille shut the screen. Nothing relevant to your decision. That sentence contained every warning sign I had learned during the week. I reached for the laptop. Zoe blocked me. Nina grabbed my wrist, and Sabrina opened her door shouting, "Abort!" 4 women scattered in 4 directions, leaving me alone beside the suitcases. You are all terrible criminals. Monday morning, I carried my first box toward the elevator, and the doors opened to reveal 4 women with luggage. Camille had 1 suitcase, Nina carried 2 bags and a cooler, Zoe guarded 3 equipment cases, while Sabrina held a pink suitcase, my black jacket, and absolutely no shame. Nobody moved until the doors began closing and I blocked them with my foot. Why do all of you have luggage? Camille claimed West Hall needed better resident representation, Nina called its meal access medically inadequate, Zoe found the network offensive, while Sabrina simply liked the wallpaper. You have never seen the wallpaper, she smiled. I like it emotionally. I looked at Camille. What did you do? Camille turned her laptop toward me, revealing 4 transfer requests for separate rooms in West Graduate Hall. None had been confirmed because they had discovered one another in the elevator after planning the same thing in secret. Camille did not trust me to enter another building without somebody reading the regulations, Nina did not trust me to eat after midnight, and Zoe claimed she could not maintain 2 networks from a distance. Sabrina's form contained 1 reason. The current resident required continued exposure. You were all going to follow me? Zoe adjusted her glasses. Follow is an emotionally loaded word. Nina preferred relocate near, Camille called it preserving the community, while Sabrina stepped out of the elevator. Yes. The doors closed behind Sabrina, leaving 5 people and enough luggage to invade a country. I tried not to laugh, but a week of pressure escaped at once. Camille insisted this was not amusing, so I reminded her that they had tried to evict me for 6 days. She corrected that to 4, and argued that 46 of her 47 rules were enforceable. Nina nearly removed salt from my blood, Zoe turned my bedroom into an escape room, and Sabrina tried to kiss me in front of half the campus. Sabrina raised 1 finger. Tried is unfair, I stopped voluntarily. Nina turned toward her. Your balance stopped you. Zoe opened the old scoreboard, making Sabrina accuse her of lying about deleting it. I lie when stressed. Camille closed the tablet. This is exactly why we cannot live unsupervised. I put down the box. What happens if I stay? The hallway went quiet before Camille promised the transfer request would disappear. Nina said the meal schedule would continue, Zoe allowed manual lighting, and Sabrina stepped closer. I get a real date. Camille looked at her, Nina looked at her, and Zoe reopened the poll, but Sabrina did not retreat. I said what everyone else was avoiding. Camille faced me. If you stay, it must be because you choose the room, not because we followed you into an elevator. I admitted that was a difficult image to ignore. Her voice softened. We wanted you gone because you changed our home, and now we want you to stay for the same reason. That was the answer, not a rule, study result, or smart system prediction. 4 women had packed their lives before asking me to change mine, which was absurd, reckless, expensive, and clearer than anything they had said. I opened the housing portal with 43 minutes remaining and read every line this time. Sabrina leaned over my right shoulder, Nina leaned over my left, Zoe read from behind me, while Camille corrected all 3. At the bottom, I ignored collect key and selected decline transfer. For 1 second, nothing happened, then Sabrina kissed my cheek, fast, warm, and real, before stepping back. Nina grabbed my wrist and reported a pulse of 112. Someone kissed me. She looked directly at Sabrina. Environmental spike. Zoe changed the campus poll while Camille took my phone and opened the calendar. No romantic competition in the hallway. Sabrina touched her lips. It wasn't a competition, nobody else participated. The other 3 moved at once, so I raised my box as a shield and claimed West Hall might still be available. Camille blocked the elevator. Nina blocked the stairs, Zoe locked the doors, and Sabrina smiled. Too late, you read the terms. We carried everything back into room 417, which took 7 minutes, because most of my belongings had never truly left. Camille withdrew the transfer requests, Nina placed the cooler in my refrigerator, Zoe reconnected my screen and changed my classification from temporary mail unit to permanent system administrator, while Sabrina returned my jacket and took my hoodie. I placed the rice cooker on its shelf, nobody touched it, and I had finally won. Then Camille called an emergency meeting. The new residency agreement contained 8 rules, including permission before entering bedrooms or conducting medical tests, no experiments involving private footage, no fabricated romantic research, no eviction challenges, no public polls, and no stealing Evan's clothing. Sabrina objected to the clothing rule, Zoe objected to the poll rule, Nina requested a medical exception, and Camille rejected all 3. I added Rule 8, giving every resident 1 equal vote, which Camille read twice before signing. Sabrina raised her hand and proposed scheduling the real date. Camille insisted that was not a residency issue. Sabrina argued it affected common resources. Nina asked what time, and Zoe opened a private poll. I tried using my equal vote to leave the meeting, but all 4 women denied it together. When I pointed at Rule 8, Camille added one final line explaining that the subject of a vote could abstain but could not escape. I had been equal for 11 seconds. 3 months later, I remained the only man on Bellwether's 4th floor. The old women-only sign stayed beside the elevator, because housing moved slowly, and Sabrina thought it was funny, while somebody had added "except Evan" underneath. Camille denied responsibility, although the handwriting was hers. The campus still called me the dorm husband, and the viral poll disappeared after Zoe promised she had deleted it. She had not, because she checked the numbers every Tuesday. Camille reduced the rulebook from 47 pages to 2, and still scheduled Thursday dinners with me to review the residency agreement, although she stopped bringing it after our 3rd dinner. Nina began eating real meals and sleeping almost 6 hours, and while she stopped using a sensor, her fingers still found my wrist whenever Sabrina came too close, making the medical explanation less convincing. Zoe rebuilt the smart system with privacy controls, so my door no longer locked me inside, although it announced romantic conflict detected whenever 2 women entered the hallway together. Zoe called that a safety feature. Sabrina and I went on a real date, then another, without cards, cameras, experiments, or the word exposure. On the 3rd date, she kissed me without falling over. When we returned, Camille was reading in the common room at 11:30, Nina was making tea she did not drink, and Zoe was repairing a device that was not broken. Nobody admitted they had waited up. Harem life was less glamorous than the campus imagined, involving arguments over refrigerator shelves, stolen chargers, wet towels, and 4 brilliant women who could solve complex problems but could not admit jealousy without creating a research category. The $200 discount survived, although my food budget did not. Group dinners, emergency desserts, replacement hoodies, and 1 damaged smart lock consumed most of my savings, making the transfer a questionable financial success. Emotionally, the returns were positive, which was Zoe's phrase, and I pretended not to like it. One Sunday morning, a new housing offer appeared on my phone, promising a private room in a new building for $300 less if I confirmed immediately. Behind me, Camille accused Sabrina of stealing my jacket. Nina accused Zoe's coffee machine of damaging human sleep. Zoe defended the machine as perfect, and Sabrina shouted that possession was a social construct. I looked at the offer, then I deleted it without opening the regulations. Camille saw me and asked what it was. Spam. She told me to verify before deleting official communication. But I had learned enough about cheap rooms. Sabrina leaned over my shoulder. How much cheaper? Not enough. Nina placed breakfast in front of me. Zoe's system displayed my Sunday schedule. Camille added a meeting. Sabrina stole my toast, and the kitchen became loud again. I signed up for a dorm room swap to save $200, and nobody told me it was the women's graduate dorm. Nobody warned me that 4 women would declare war, expose that war to the entire campus, or pack their own suitcases when I finally agreed to leave. I came for the discount, but I stayed because some mistakes are too good to correct. Best $200 I never saved.